start. So, like I said, this is what I'm going to be talking about. So let us start. So, the first question that is part of the agenda brief is, what are the most pressing environmental concerns? And as we all know, there's a multitude of environmental concerns that we're facing. They're not even concerns, we're in an environmental crisis right now. Concerns seem too lukewarm to address the issue, but the three biggest environmental challenges which encompass most of the others would be climate change, pollution, and loss of nature and biodiversity. And like I mentioned over here, they're all interlinked and they kind of each make each other worse. And I don't need to define either one of them. They're pretty obvious. Climate change and climate related disasters is probably the biggest one. And then there's pollution of air, land, water. We've all studied this in our AE classes in Hindu as well. So I don't need to go on and on about this. And as you can see, it's not just an environmental crisis, obviously, it's a human crisis at this stage. And it's the root cause of that is the unsustainable consumption and production patterns we have now and that we've had for the past centuries, which have led to where we are now. And going from there would be the solution to that, at least one of the solutions, because there's no one solution to this environmental crisis. So the one solution that at least I'm working on for now is circular economy. So a lot of people don't know what it is, so I'll just explain what it is and just cover a little bit of the basics. I'm not getting too much into the topic because there's a lot of things to cover. But as we can see, the kind of economies we have now and the consumption and production models we have now, they're all linear. So which means you take natural resources, you make products out of them, and then you waste that. So it's a linear flow and it's very extractive of natural resources and so it's very, very consumption based and doesn't extract enough value from the products. And it's the core driver behind the environmental and socio-economic challenges and impacts we have, whether it's poverty or climate change or like pollution, all of it. I mean, and it makes economic and gender disparities worse as well. So the linear model is kind of a core driver behind the issues we face today. So a circular economy is in effect a way to change the linear economy model, and so a circular economy, as it sounds, is a circular way of consumption and production, and it kind of aims to make the flow of material circular instead of a straight chain. So it's all about extending the product lifespan. This is UNEDO's definition by circular economy design, technology, digital creations, and it basically talks about making the supply chain circular so that when you take resources, you don't just waste it after you've used it. The way you extract value from the waste and you use it as raw material again, as secondary material, I mean. So it's continuously used in the cycle and it's not thrown out at any stage. So basic words of a circular economy would be that it's restorative, regenerative, based on principles of resource efficiency, reuse, recyclability, durability. So these are a lot of keywords which we use in circular economy. And just to talk about what I'm doing right now with UNEP, I am and have developed their project for circular economy for Asia and the Pacific. So we're targeting kind of integrating circular economy in government policies, increasing access to financing for private sector, and kind of incorporating resource efficiency in sustainable lifestyles for people. So I've developed the whole project for Asia Pacific, and we're going to be implementing it in 3-4 countries, which we're currently discussing with the governments. That's what I'm doing. And as you can see, this is like a simple diagram to show you what I was talking about, because diagrams always make it easier to understand. So as you can see, it's a circle over here, and then there's a simplified version. It's more complex, but so again, I'm just covering the basics so that you have a basic understanding of circular economy, enough to talk about it somewhere else maybe. And so the four main building blocks of circular economy, according to Ellen MacArthur Foundation, are circular economy design, which are all about innovation, digital technology, and upskilling, which are very, very core pillars of having and incorporating a circular economy. Second would be developing circular innovative business models for SMEs, for private sector. And while these business models might be developed by entrepreneurs or small SMEs, them being mainstreamed by big private sector players would really increase the scaling up of circular economy. Then reverse cycles, which means you rethink and transform the whole supply chain, and instead of thinking of one product as just, just that you kind of include a life cycle thinking of it and have extended producer responsibility, so that you don't just see the product for itself, you see the raw materials that went into it, you see the building process that went into it. So all of that should count when you have a product in any sector. And the fourth would be having enablers and favorable conditions, which are obviously the policies, frameworks, access to financing, incentives, capacity building and upskilling, and collaboration. So this is kind of where UNEP comes in, where I work. We're targeting kind of all of these together, in fact, and we're trying to enable integration of circular economy for national governments. So that's, and like I said, they should be incorporated across all sectors, product, services, because in effect, circularity is a way of thinking. If you see in nature, most, like all things are kind of cyclic. There's a water cycle, there's a nitrogen cycle, everything is a cycle. And this is what the circular economy model tries to reproduce in economies instead, to have the circular and cyclic thinking. And so that is circular economy in a very short, brief description. So, and now we move on to environmental policy, because there's so many things to cover. And Amitosh, please let me know the time, by the way, otherwise I might keep talking. But yeah, so environmental policy. Environmental policy is obviously any policy or measure taken by the government or private sector or an NGO to address human impacts on the environment. Very simplified, again, as you can see. But and why do we need environmental policy? We need it because the environment is considered free for all, because it's not charging you any money, so you don't care about it. And which is why it's also considered external to economic decisions, and it's not given its due value and consideration. And it has concepts such as polluter pays principle, whereas industries who've kind of polluted in a river, they're going to pay for it, while after the damage has already been done. So from that, the next concept would be mitigation, where you try and fix things before the damage is done. And the last step towards that is adaptation, where you kind of build resilience before the problem occurs. So these are the three types of concepts. And there are different types of environmental policies that are implemented and incorporated by national governments, regional governments, international NGOs like the UN. So these types of, there's regulations, of course, where you have a minimum quality that an industry is supposed to meet or something like that. Then there's financial instruments, which are like subsidies, for example, on solar panels or solar geysers or heaters, like Government of India has had, or the e-vehicle subsidies that we have now. And there's taxes, and there's fines, there's levies. So there's both incentives and disincentives. And then there's environmental reporting and eco-labeling, where there's environment impact assessment, which has been a topic of a lot of discussion in India for now. And then there's the, like I said, eco-labeling, which is the International Organization for Standardization, where, for example, on fridges and appliances, we have that 5-star rating. So that's part of eco-labeling for increasing resource efficiency. And then, of course, there's like the international environmental policies like Kyoto, Paris, which have carbon trading emissions, clean development mechanism, and NDCs, nationally determined contributions, and all of that. I'll talk about this later in Politics of Climate Change. So if you want to know more, don't worry. And so once you've discussed what environment policy is, there's obviously a lot of challenges before we can get to a stage where it's really creating a lot of impact. I mean, environmental policy has done a lot. It has done a lot. For example, if you see Montreal Protocol, the big reason why the ozone is improved and is way better than it was now before is because the Montreal Protocol got CFCs to be banned by all countries. So environmental policies has played a big role, but there's still a lot of challenges to go before we can say that we're effectively tackling climate change or the biodiversity crisis or the pollution crisis. So the challenges, of course, are lack of political will, which is the biggest one. Governments don't see why they should put environmental policies in place and why it's important. And then there's developing countries have competing priorities, which then developing countries like India still economically better off, but there's developing countries where, you know, health, education, even in India actually, where you have stuff like people are poor, people don't have health, and the governments wonder, like, you know, environment is last of your priorities when your people are barely living. So that, and then there's lack of effective consensus, which you see in the UN, and why international agreements keep failing. And then there's lack of integration in the policies across government departments or ministries. So the question is, how can environmental policy be improved? And like it was part of the agenda, how can public policy target climate change? So this is like an answer to both of them, or at least my answer to both of them. I'm not going to say that I'm the authority on anything, but and these are not, this is not an exhaustive list, but I do feel implementation is a big challenge, because you can make as many environmental policies as you want, but a lot of them are not even implemented properly, or you know, people are not held accountable to implement them. So we need better and efficient methods instead of all the red tape that we have. Make it better and make it more transparent, which gets us to the next point, that you need to measure environmental performance and report it. Otherwise, it's completely useless. So policies should have a pledge, or, you know, have it in them that you have to continuously measure and improve environmental performance, whether it's for industries or government itself. You have to continuously measure if the policy is doing what it was meant to do. The next point would be that you shift from inputs like inspections and endless rules and, you know, rules and regulations, which you have to like jump through hoops to get to a basic thing, where you shift to performance and you measure that. And the last would be environment policy integration, where you don't, I mean, it's not just part of the Ministry of Environment which needs to care about the environment, right? In any government, the point is that for all the high impact sectors such as transport, agriculture, industry, energy, they all need to have environmental policy integrated in them itself, and not be like earmarked separately, so that they can actually have effective impact. And that's environmental policy in a capsule again. And now we move to politics of climate change. So let's talk about Wait, I'm not sure. Where is the... Okay, sorry, I messed up the slides. But okay, so before I talk about politics of climate change, let's just talk about what is climate change. I know we all think we know what climate change is, but there's so many different definitions out there, right? So the IPCC has one definition, where it's the UNFCCC has one definition, Greenpeace has another definition, ExxonMobil has a different definition. And I mean, I'm not going to read them out, but it's just to say that we have a lot of different definitions of the same issue. And as we say, we take it for granted that we all are talking about the same thing. But it usually isn't that way. Everybody is addressing a different level of concern and probably talking about something else. And if you see, the one of the only common things in all these definitions is that all definitions are scientific, but we're not at the stage where climate change is just a science problem anymore. It's affecting human lives, it's affecting education, food, political security, disasters, economies. It's affecting everything. So at this stage, I think we need to get those into and that's where we move to. How do you frame climate change? So, how we talk about climate change as a problem and challenge influences the kind of solutions we envisage. If we see it just as a scientific problem, then we'll only look to scientific solutions. But if we see it as a as a problem across all sectors like economic, communication, social, then we will incorporate those solutions as well. And that's where it comes from. That's why it's so difficult to build consensus on climate change, because people see it differently. People see different levels of the threat. So, and this is what my slide is saying as well, that we often advocate for specific solutions while dismissing others. And to be honest, we're kind of all guilty of it. Like for me, even as somebody who studied conservation and climate change, I might be biased towards one type of solutions over another and dismissing one set entirely. And I mean, and as you can see, a paper that I read and was very well cited, where they call these people as issue advocates, people or organizations that promote their own agenda while not being honest about the weaknesses or alternatives of the idea presented. Okay, this is just an example, but I'll tell you how. So, for example, there's like, if you see solar power or reforestation or technologies for climate change, you see that all of them will claim to be the number one solution. Whereas the point is that there is no one solution. So, and the fact is that they're each basically in competition with each other for the same resources, because each solution requires government and financial support. So, like again, in this webinar, like I just want you to think about, because this is like discourse and policy, right? I want you to think about, just get you thinking, who decides which solution should be supported if everyone is pitching theirs as the number one solution to climate change. And that's where it comes to. I mean, they post this conundrum which says, is a meat eating cyclist better or worse than a vegetarian car driver? So who decides? Who decides what is better? Who decides what one should be doing? And as you can see, again, I'm not giving you the answer to the questions, because that's not the point of this, because there's no one right answer. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of discourse, to just think about and have your own opinion on things. And none of the opinions are right or wrong, unless you believe climate change isn't real. That's the only opinion that's wrong. But other than that, I mean, every opinion has its own validity. But as you can see, like I said, there's different framings of climate change: political, economic, behavior, cultural adaptation, science tech, development, security. Climate change is a political problem. If you see climate change as a political issue, it would obviously mean that you understand that it requires political solutions to gain acceptance. And this just talks about how to spot a political framing in general life. Governments are important actors in this. Poorer countries is often linked to climate justice, which I will talk about later because I'm very passionate about that. And then obviously need for political consensus and agreement is very important in the politics of climate change. Otherwise, nothing happens, which is usually the case at UN meetings. But yeah, international agreement is essential, and climate change competes with or is linked to other political priorities. And So the question is, how does political change occur? Again, consensus building is probably one of the most important points of the politics of climate change, because you need to have everybody on board, which is probably the hardest to achieve, because countries usually disagree on who's responsible and who should be doing what. And then there's political activism, of course. So as we've seen now with the whole climate movement that we've had with Greta Thunberg, that publics mobilized to act by pressure groups. And so, talking about international politics of climate change, I will talk about the Kyoto and the Paris Agreement and just tell you a little bit about it. Not really about the facts, maybe just a little bit about the pluses and minuses. And the Kyoto was, if you guys don't know, ratified in 2005. It was based on the fact that global warming is occurring. It is likely that human carbon emissions have caused it. And the main points of the Kyoto Protocol were the clean development mechanism, which involved renewable energy, energy efficiency, fuel switching, the emissions trading markets, which is carbon credits, and the joint implementation projects, which is again carbon credits, but jointly implemented by different countries. And so Kyoto, basically, this is what Kyoto did. Kyoto established a political justice system. There were more carbon allowances to those that already produce more. It excluded developing countries from targets, and that's how it recognized historical responsibility.
ये पार की है.
Oh, so the Kyoto Protocol included the concept of common but differentiated responsibility, and I'm not going to be talking about a lot of things, but yeah. So, like I said, that historical responsibility, per capita emissions, and per GDP emissions were three proposed solutions, and I can talk about them a little bit later. So coming to climate justice, and then we'll go to Paris. We'll come back to Kyoto after this, but this is a part of Kyoto, and then we'll go to Paris. And so climate justice, there's two philosophical views to it. There's a utilitarian view, which is proposed by the richer nations, and it says that carbon emissions should be counted per GDP and should be linked to economic efficiency and growth. And they kind of justify their emissions by saying that the atmosphere is global, right? So all carbon released is the same, it's equally bad. And so that's what they say, that the atmosphere doesn't care about where carbon is reduced. So market-based systems can achieve cost-effective reductions wherever they take place. Then it says greatest good for the greatest number, must preserve the ability of the wealthy to maintain wealth creation to trickle down to all. So this is basically a very capitalist perspective where you're talking about kind of shirking your own responsibility and saying, it's everybody's, we're all in this together, we're all responsible, so you do your thing. It's basically saying that, shirking your own responsibility. And like it says, would be unfair to limit the growth of developed economies, which causes the upliftment all around the globe, which we all know is not true. But yeah, let's go to the next slide. So then we talk about the second perspective, which is the egalitarian view. And as you can see by how I'm talking, that's the one I agree with. And so this talks about that every person all over the planet should have an equal right to emit equal amounts of carbon. It's not fair to allow the wealthy to produce more carbon than the poor, because if you see, the rich people produce 13 times the carbon emissions of poor people. World's richest 1% produce double the carbon emissions of the poorest 50%. And this is like a super recent study by Oxfam. I just read it like a few weeks ago. So the whole narrative that, overpopulation is the root cause of climate and environmental challenges, it's not true. The poor people of our country, of any country, are the ones who are most vulnerable to climate change, whereas they've not done anything to cause it. And why should they not have access to a good means of living just because the rich people now want to save the planet when they've done everything they can to pollute it. So again, we come back to historical responsibility, and it talks about how developed nations and 100 companies, just 100 companies all over the world, are responsible for as much as 79% of the carbon emissions, which is why we're in the crisis we are in now. And common but differentiated responsibility for climate action talks about, yes, equality in climate action, because now we all need to take responsibility, but the benefit should go to the least advantaged, and the brunt should be picked up by developed nations. So, and then we talk about the most important factor, that all emissions are not the same. There are luxury emissions and there are survival emissions. Like it says, what right do rich countries have to go around telling poor developing countries to limit their development and prevent access to improved living standards? There are carbon emissions we need, which are survival emissions, which a lot of poor people don't have access to, and emissions we do not need, which are luxuries. So it's unfair to impose the luxuries, our luxuries, or developed countries' luxuries on poor people's access to decent living and fundamental rights. So this is just an example of how developed countries or rich people talk to poor people about forests and the environment. There's a poor guy cutting a tree like he's done for years and just for fuel or fodder or something, and this rich guy in his Hawaiian shirt in his car is telling him we need to protect that tree to protect us from the greenhouse effect. So this is just to kind of show how hypocritical the whole thing is. And as you can see, this is a whole chart of the historical responsibility. And as you can see, EU and the US are responsible for roughly 2/3 of the carbon emissions that we have now. So this talks a lot about who's responsible and who should do what. I mean, at least get you thinking about what do you think about it. And coming back to Kyoto, we talk about how it's been called the wrong solution at the right time. It failed on a number of grounds: efficiency, effectiveness, and it was a top-down approach where Kyoto told countries what to do instead of letting countries decide for themselves, which didn't really work. It focused on short-term targets and low-hanging fruit, whereas climate change is a longer-term problem. So these are the challenges that Kyoto had, and then we come to Paris, which came after Kyoto. So Paris is the one we have now, and Paris talks about that the long-term temperature goal is to keep the increase in average temperature well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5. So the Paris Agreement has tried to be a more bottom-up approach where it lets countries decide their own targets and their own ambitions, which is the NDCs, nationally determined contributions. And so that's what Paris has tried to do and fix the problem with Kyoto. But as you can see, the pledges have till now not gotten anywhere close to a 2 degrees Celsius target, let alone 1.5. So we see again nationally determined contributions. Each country must decide their own plan and report on the contribution to mitigate global warming. There's no mechanism forcing these targets on countries. It's all soft power and kind of peer pressure in a sense at a global scale to get things working. And countries have to declare what they can achieve with and without financial support, give their carbon emission plans. So if you've read this, we like countries like we'll cut 50% emissions, 30% emissions. So that's all part of the Paris Agreement. And as you can see, Paris is trying to address medium-term problems and give medium-term options instead of just addressing the low-hanging fruit. And so again, the whole point of Paris is that it's kind of focusing on moral duty of acting and the peer pressure instead of forcing a mechanism on people, on countries, I'm sorry. So the challenges with Paris, and there are a lot of challenges with Paris Agreement as well. The greenhouse gas emissions dropped 13% between 1990 and 2016, which is great, but it's expected to slow down because the EU has overachieved its targets and the incentives for more action declined because that doesn't mean EU is doing like well. EU is doing well compared to other countries in the world, yes. But if you overachieved your targets, that means your targets have not been ambitious enough. And that's the case in some aspects for India as well. So again, it's not like oh wow, they overachieved their targets. So and it has problems of double counting carbon credits because both producers and consumers might count the same credits, so it's counted again, which doesn't really help. But and Paris talks about more common responsibility, and it doesn't really focus on a differentiated responsibility and distributed justice, which is part of climate justice, like I described before, like holding developed countries accountable. That's less in Paris. It was more prominent in Kyoto. And yeah, I think I'm coming to the end of, I don't know how long I've been talking, but I'm just about at the end. But, and these are coming to political questions and questions I want you guys to think about or have your own opinions on, or I don't know, ask whatever. But so some authors have characterized climate change as a post-political populism, which means that at this stage, climate change politics is actually not happening. It's completely failed, and we still keep following the same thing again and again. And they argue that climate change now is post-political because now it's all bureaucracy, and it's all just jargon and writing papers and talking, publishing articles, or just basically pleasing people without actually doing anything real. And it allows all of us or people or countries to feel like, oh, we're all doing good while nothing is really delivered. And that's the case, I think, with sustainable development as well. It's a buzzword, right? So everybody puts sustainable before they use development, which means nothing. I mean, you're producing, like, I don't know, your industry is producing the worst pollutants, but you'll mention the word sustainable development on your website, and suddenly, you feel like you're doing a lot. So it's just an example that it's all a buzzword. And as you can see, climate change becomes a buzzword or OP of the masses, where everybody is talking about it, everybody wants to be a part of it, but nobody is really doing anything. And like it says, even many environmentalists have become post-political. So hopefully I'm not there yet, but yeah, there are people who just talk and talk about it and not do anything. And the image as well shows that, we planted a tree, so this is all addressing climate change. It's just an example of the world we're in currently. And so we talk about how everything about politics of climate change is focused on globalized actions, focused on UN agreements, but not on grassroots experience. And whereas it should, community action can play a big role in influencing the politics of climate change, because community action can pull government action up by highlighting local solutions and actions one can take and kind of inspire governments to do more, inspire or pull them up, for a better word. And learning from grassroots experience, if it works at the grassroots, it has the potential to be scaled up in either the state government or the national government. So it's a bottom-up political process, and community action gives you the space to experiment, which national action probably doesn't. National action, you have to have everything succeed the moment you implement it, whereas community action, you have trial and error, you have the space to do that. So like it says, focusing on nation states has taken away from other duties, and individual action is still important, and it is the imperfect moral duty as a citizen. So you might not be doing everything perfectly. You might not be buying all sustainable clothes and, just leaving consumerism because it's hard to. But trying your best is where it really matters, and doing what you can is what really matters. And this is my last slide before we get to the questions. So this is just questions I want you guys to think about, and you have your own opinion or take on, or I don't know, form your own perspective on this. So the questions: what extent have political actors delivered on their rhetoric? What factors are behind or blamed for the failure to deliver? What kind of political debates are being referenced in relation to climate change? Is that positive or negative? Who do you imagine to be the most powerful actor in this whole climate change discourse? And at what scale do you think climate action should be implemented, and what would it be most, at what scale would it be most effective at? And then you talk about what ideas of justice or equity do you envisage in a political framing. Like I said, I am very biased to one side of it, and climate justice and historical responsibility is personally I'm very passionate about. So, like, what are your ideas? What do you think about it? And again, to what extent is maintaining our lifestyle and the national interest at the core of our discourse? Or are there more radical ideas? So is it just us sitting here talking about government should do this, government should do that, and living our own lives, flying all the time or traveling in cars, doing giddies or whatever? But I mean, are we talking about our own responsibility, or are we just blaming governments, or do we just think switching the tap off is enough and we don't need to hold other people accountable for their actions? So there's a lot of things to think about while you talk about climate change and the discourse regarding the policy and the politics of it. And I think I'm done with my presentation. Like it says, thank you. And if you have any queries, just ask me now. Emailing is probably not required, but yeah.
Yeah, guys, so you can just put in your questions in the chat box itself.
Okay, wait. The one we have at hand is a climate crisis and not a climate change phenomena, as that's a natural one, but as humans have accelerated it. Well, it is a climate crisis, but it's called climate change. Yes, climate change is a natural process and has happened in the past, but this is an anthropogenic climate change. And I think when we discuss it at the UN, in governments, in states, we all understand that we're talking about anthropogenic climate change instead of natural climate change. And the only people who talk about climate change being natural are the ones who don't believe in climate change. So I'm just going to straight away say that. That it's a buzzword, they give it as a buzzword and there's no action oriented. Yes, people use climate change as a buzzword, people use sustainable development as a buzzword. Everybody wants to be green and not do anything, and that's, yeah.
I think that's more of a marketing, I believe that's more of a marketing tactic for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a branding strategy.
Being green is very cool now. I mean, I see a lot of influencers and all also nowadays where it's all very green, but you're buying like 100 clothes a week. That's not green. So it's just how, it's cool, it's trending, so let's do it. It's like a bandwagon support. But okay, UK government planted millions of trees and has promised to plant millions. Do you think this is right? It should be. I think we should have a combination of approaches. Afforestation is great if implemented correctly. You shouldn't plant the same trees, hundreds and millions of the same tree. You have to do ecosystem planning for it, see what works where and how you can build an ecosystem from it instead of doing like monoculture or monoplantations. But afforestation is not and cannot be the only solution. Tech is important and they should be combined. That's the whole point. There is no single solution to climate change or the economic crisis. We have to employ a multitude of approaches across sectors if we're to actually have a shot at solving this. So tech solutions are very important because we're not at the stage where switching the tap off or switching the light off is going to save the planet. It's doing the job, yes, but you need to have something more too. So it should all be combined and done together, in my opinion. I don't know what Miyawaki's style of afforestation is, but I'm not sure what that is. But I'm glad if environmental organizations are doing that. As big nations still worry about economy more, so as the Green New Deal proposal was put up, is it really going? Well, yeah, Green New Deal. So it's funny because I was researching on the Green New Deal for the project that I developed because EU was going to be one of our donors for it. But yeah, job employment creation is a big part of that because if you see like circular economy, it requires a complete transition of the supply chain and creating innovative technologies and digital skills, which would require you to like, which is a whole new sector. So though that whole new sector requires a lot of new people, and for that, that creates employment. I mean, I didn't put any facts and all in this right now, but there's a lot of data on how circular economy can help you save money, create thousands and thousands of jobs. Even in like for UK, I have the data numbers, but like it creates jobs. It helps cover economic disparity, gender disparity. It's so and economic growth. So circular economy can potentially cover a lot of the issues that we have. And the green jobs, yes, they would be permanent, because if you incorporate circular economy as a function of your country, then or your sector or your services, then it's like you can only upgrade it from there. You're not going to go back to the linear then. So I don't think those jobs would go away, especially since I work in circular economy. But there's a lot of discourse around how we as individuals need to be responsible. Yes, yes. Is it possible to mix some unless segregation is unfold? This is a good question. Should I read the question out aloud, or you guys can read it on the chat box? But it's basically talking about individual action. So I have a lot of opinions on individual action, like I have a lot of opinions on everything related to the environment. But I feel that it's very important to do your own bit, because more than anything, it gives you a sense of purpose. My passion for the environment comes from thinking I can save the planet as a young child, which is very important to me. So those individual actions are important to have that sense of action. And again, it's not doing any harm. You switching the lights off, you wearing sustainable clothes, you switching the light off, I don't know, like doing all the green things. It's not going vegan is not bad. These are all good things anyway. So it's not like ye karna nahi chahiye, kuch ho nahi raha hai to. It's not like that. Like you should still do it. And at your own scale, I'm not saying go vegan. I'm not vegan either, but I do what I can and what suits me and what is sustainable for me in the long run. But you do have to hold governments, private sectors accountable for their responsibility. Ultimately, climate change is not at a stage, like I said, where switching the tap off is going to do it. But it's still helping. It is still helping. It might not do 50% of the job or 100% of the job, but it's still doing that 5%. So there's no harm in doing it. You can do that 5% while still telling the governments, ki, you have created the problem, please fix it. So you hold them accountable while doing your own bit, and that's the best. That's how you stay motivated, because you know that I'm doing so much. Why isn't the government? That should be the approach. But what do you have to say about women bear the greater brunt of climate change? Like I said, the poor, the vulnerable, indigenous communities, they are the most vulnerable to climate change, and they are the people who've done the least to cause it. So this is completely true. For example, in villages, women walk kilometers to get water, right? And now there's data on the fact that those water resources are becoming further and further from where they live and where they are. So who is bearing the brunt of that? It's women, right? And this is just one example I'm giving. So if you think of it in terms of that, the most vulnerable people are the least advantaged, and that would include probably, I mean, climate change is a crisis, and any crisis makes normal problems worse. So just think about women already face a lot of stuff, right? So climate change is going to make it worse. It's simple. Okay, what is that? Is innovation the answer to protecting the environment, or eco-political partnership? Like I said, there's no one answer. There is no number one solution. Everything needs to be done together, and everyone needs to come on board. There is no that, oh, this thing I will solve the climate change with solar power. That's not how it works. Everybody has to come together. Withdrawal of US and Paris Agreement, how will it affect long-term international cooperation? US, okay, I shouldn't. But USA, yeah, it does suck that they pulled out of the Paris Agreement. But I don't know how it will affect long-term cooperation. Unfortunately, I'm not an authority on that. But I'm hoping for the best. Stay optimistic and do your bit, and hold people accountable is what I'm doing. How does circular economy help in the mitigation of climate process? In the process of waste management, yes, but how exactly does it help in climate change? Okay, this I can talk about. Circular economy, so waste, yes, but it kind of addresses all three problems. If you see, if you're using the materials, you like the raw materials that you extracted from nature, if you reuse them again and again, So you're not constantly consuming natural resources. You're decoupling national consumption from your economic growth, because the products you take once are in the cycle forever. That's the aim, right? So it addresses that, and through the same thing, it addresses climate change, because national consumption is controlled and reduced through circular economy, because again you're using the same thing again and you're changing the whole supply chain and greening the whole thing. So that is in effect organically addressing climate change, because you're not industries are not constantly producing, polluting, wasting, and like I said, these problems are all interlinked across the board. And right now, circular economy, I'm working on plastics, food, and electronics. So and we're trying to put e-vehicles instead of the normal vehicles. So if and when hopefully that happens, that'll obviously directly impact climate change, because automobiles and transport is a big polluter. So having e-vehicles in place, which India is doing really well on at least, yeah, decently well. So that would directly address climate change. Sorry. Okay. Can countries like India, whose economy and is greater, can we afford to give preference to development projects at the cost of? Honestly, I think that sorry. I think in the 21st century, we don't need to have development projects at the cost of ecological well-being. I don't understand why. We're in the 21st century now. I don't see why a highway has to go through a national park. Like, I'm sure it can manage outside the national park, but I just don't see why. But as you can see, there has to be, okay, I understand there has to be some balance. Dams and all are important, and they've given a lot to our country. I'm not going to be like, okay, dams are entirely bad or something, but you have to kind of equate it. You can't just completely bulldoze the environment and the local communities just to achieve economic growth and gain. Who are you doing the economic growth for if you're harming the environment and your local people? So, but in light of the new environmental assessment, again, I'm not going to get political about it. I do have my reservations on it, and as you can see, there was a whole thing where you had to give in your opinions by email, and I'm sure we all did that. And there's not much else we can do right now. And I'm as part of the UN, I'm not supposed to comment too much on this. So. Sorry, but EIA, yeah, it could have been better. And EIA anyway in India sucks, so I don't know why they're making it worse. This is personal opinion only. Actually taking the responsibility of their waste. Oh, what is happening? Thank you so much, Sumit sir. Wait. Of course, you have the right to object it, and I'm saying that I'm trying not to be political because I work in an international agency. You have the right to be as political as you want. And you should hold governments accountable. Have become, hello, Monika ma'am. Good to see you. The PPE kits, N5 masks have become inevitable in the Sunday. They also amplify heaven. It's hard to lessen the impacts of plastic usage in the COVID pandemic, because you're not going to say, oh, guys, don't use plastic masks, don't use plastic packaging, don't use PPE kits, because environmental crisis is people's health and lives at stake. Nobody's going to say that. So I think that whole thing will come afterwards. But for the food industry, yeah, food deliveries have gone up. Delivery of normal groceries and all have gone up, which has increased plastic waste. But again, these are things one is not really talking about right now, because health is priority and lives are priority over plastic waste for now, unfortunately. But we will come back to it next year. UNEP is working on it. Cutting down religious practices by enforcement of law and not having laws and policies. Won't common man feel burdened by bearing the brunt when industry will get away with? What do you mean religious practices by enforcement of law? Do you mean, I don't know what you mean, but I agree. Industrialists shouldn't get away with it. They should not get away with it at all. Nobody who's responsible for this stuff should get away with it. They should all fix what they're doing, fix their industries, and be held accountable for their responsibility. Polluter pays is important. Extended producer responsibility is important, and they should be held accountable. But religious practices, if they're harming the environment, I feel, I mean, if it's a religion, obviously I'm not going to say don't do it, but you can try and make it better. There's always a better way to do things. I can give you an example. I used to love crackers as a kid. I used to love burning crackers all the time, every Diwali. But now that I work at UNEP and I've worked for so long in this field, I feel super guilty about the fact that I used to love them. So now I just allow like one Fulchari or something because I still love it, but I can do it without creating a lot of harmful pollutants for it. And it hasn't lessened Diwali for me at all. I still love it as much, and it's coming soon, so I'm very excited. But yes, so you can always find a way to make things better. Even if you don't do 100%, there's always a middle point. It's just the dependent behavior that's showcased by people, and they rely more on others and do not wish to adjust. I believe people must learn. Yes, I definitely agree with you, Gargi. It's very easy to be a part of the climate movement, and everybody wants to hold a placard and say save the planet or share some post, but nobody's doing anything. I'm from Chandigarh, everybody goes on Giddies and then posts about the climate. So it's just everybody, it's again a buzzword. Everybody wants to be on board, but nobody wants to hold their own responsibility about it, which is important because once you do your own bit, that's when you hold other people actually accountable. How to get a career in environment protection. We need all people on board. So no matter what field you're in, should be a part of the climate solving this whole challenge that we're in. And I mean, you don't have to be a part of the environment protection thing per se, like I am. But if you want to, then I mean, depends what course and all you're into and what are the options regarding that. A Google search would help, or if you want to talk to me directly, you can do that. If I can help, I'm not sure though, but I'm sure I could try. But there's always so many options for law, for journalism, for business. I mean,
International relations.
yeah, everything. There's environment is everywhere nowadays, so you can always find your way in if you really want to. And even if you don't want it to be a career, you can do it in your own lives. You can contribute to NGOs. You can do volunteering. There's always so much to do. And especially with digital platforms and social media, we have access to so much information and knowledge. So there's never a dearth of ways to help out if you want to. I think that's all. Have I done everything? There isn't a career counseling session, but you're great and inspirational. Thank you so much. How to make a career in environment protection? Okay, I think this is the same question, but how to make a career like me? I did my master's in environmental conservation at UCL, and then thankfully, and then I interned at a bunch of environmental places, and I thankfully got the job. But there's a lot of internships and jobs available, and I did a master's in something I cared about regarding the environment. That obviously you can do environmental law, environmental journalism if you're more into that. You can do the social science side of environment if that's what you're interested in. You can do climate change, you can do pollution, you can do environmental engineering. There's a whole field out there if you're like across the board. So mine is the only like one way I picked. So it's like one of 100. So I'm not the only way. But if you want to talk about this more, I'd be happy to help out. You can reach out to me. I don't know, on email, actually, maybe Facebook. But doing that and adopted a sustainable living. Thank you. I'm glad this is your second one. I'm happy to hear that. I've adopted a sustainable. I'm glad you adopted a sustainable living style, Divyam. But I think I've addressed all the questions. So if there's anything else, or Monica, ma'am, if there's, I don't know, Amitosh, what is
I
next?
actually had a question.
Yes.
So I believe that one challenge which is particular to the crisis that climate change is the fact that the negative consequences don't really seem really immediate. That the consequences would impact us directly. So if we were to compare the climate crisis with that of the coronavirus, so the immediate impact of coronavirus is so
Yeah.
immediate, that governments in all nations suddenly come on board and they forget about
Yeah.
all of their animosities and personal issues. You talk
Yeah.
about people from all sections of the society, all of them know what the virus is now. So, I mean, comparing, in the context of this, how do we make poor people who most likely are oblivious to the, the climate change crisis that we have? How do we make them, concerned about this?
So again, I know that I think more than anything, the COVID thing has shown that if governments actually come together, they can do so much so quickly, and it's just appalling that they haven't come together for climate change yet. That's what I felt,
Right,
but.
right.
Um, yeah, but I do feel, yeah, of course, Corona has direct impacts and direct changes, and it's not just like the impacts of Corona on people's lives, right? So there's a lot of accountability for governments over there. Whereas for the environment, oh, forest is burning, who cares? Flood is happening, who cares? So it's just like if it's people's lives affected, then governments tend to care more. Even though climate change is going to affect people's life, but like you said, it's very separate and distant. Kahin ek forest fire ho rahi hai, somewhere else there's a flood, somewhere else there's something. So you're not seeing the big picture really. So trying to solve climate
I mean,
change
people, it's really hard to connect all the dots and see how this
exactly,
can
and how
impact
to
your
see
daily
how
life.
it impacts you. You are sitting in your plush AC office or whatever it is. It's not really impacting me. My vote bank is still there. How does it matter? So it's just that, and again, it requires a longer term vision, and maybe once things start getting worse with the climate, the governments will wake up. Hopefully, won't be too late at that point.
Yeah,
Still
indeed,
trying to
indeed.
keep an optimistic perspective to this, whereas there's really not. But how do we let poor people? I mean, make poor people aware. I think the biggest problem is making the rich and educated aware, and actually like do things. Poor people are like far away. There's rich
Yeah,
people, educated people who know about climate change and still don't do shit. So going to poor people, like they already don't do anything about climate change. I mean, they're the ones we have to protect from climate change. They're the ones who are going to be affected once the floods start happening every month or something, or there's earthquakes happening. So they're the ones who need to be protected from that. And of course, they need to be made aware, of course. But the ones who really need to be made like actually woken up are the people in power or people who have money and education
privileged.
from
Yeah,
Cambridge, Oxford, Yale, Stanford, wherever. So it's
And
just a matter of like doing stuff. And poor people, how to make them aware? I feel I actually don't know because I haven't people with education only can't see long term about this. I don't see how poor people will see it. But I think for them, the most important would just be to describe the fact of like locally, if you describe it to them, they would understand.
yeah.
Anybody
I
who's
mean, maybe talking to the household help about this,
yeah.
small conversations.
Yeah, and small things everybody's seen. Everybody knows that it's gotten hotter. Everybody knows that that like there was a nearby lake which is dried up, and everybody has had those kind of experiences. There was like the weather was so much nicer, or there was a lake here it dried up. There used to be so many birds; they don't come anymore. Like you start the
Lot more
conversation with those
trees.
kind of things. Yeah, like small things where they relate, and then you bring it on to like the bigger stuff. That your birds are missing, but like disclaimer, there's floods and all that is going to happen. So then you like actually break down the bad stuff, but you should start with things that people can connect with because that's when you actually and kind of start seeing the picture, right? Once you can connect yourself and kind of see it happen in your own life.
True, true.
So I think
So I
that
think we wouldn't be taking any more questions. Um,
can I can
so
I can I
sure,
just
ma'am. Sure,
I've been
ma'am.
really waiting, but I did not want to disturb your the usual format of handling the queries. I mean, it's such a lovely feeling as a teacher who has had Gurmehr in her class, who has seen her grow into her 3 years when she was doing her BSc honors course in botany. I am just reminded of the times when I used to take the class and she used to sit and listen to me. And today it was such a good privilege that I got through the Symposium Society. I'm so thankful to the organizers. It is such a coincidence that, I was listening and she was speaking. I mean, I think nothing better a teacher can imagine. And it is such a satisfying and happy experience for me I'm really very happy that Gurmehr is doing so well. She is a very passionate person. I remember her very clearly. She is just the same. She speaks from her heart. Whatever she will do is from her heart. And I could see that, I could feel that. It was so evident. And Gurmehr, this is the best thing that you have. Don't you ever change. Stay as you are. Stay what you are. You are a lovely person. And my blessings and best wishes are always with you. Always keep
Thank you
growing
so
and
much,
bring more
ma'am.
knowledge to Hindu College. And it's such a beautiful experience. You really made my day. And I'm so thankful to Symposium Society. You are having such good topics of discussion. She was so confident. And I like the line when she said, diagrams make you understand better. I think these were lines which, as botany teachers, we keep repeating, in plant sciences, botany, zoology. And we keep telling this to students. So it was so good when she said this. And she mentioned about nitrogen cycle. I remember she has learned this in her ecology paper. It's such a beautiful, really, really, I'm really overwhelmed. God bless you, Gurmehr. May you get more success and always be happy and stay cheerful and stay connected. Do keep in touch with me. Do send me a personal WhatsApp whenever you
Yes,
have
ma'am.
time. It's a beautiful feeling that I have. It's difficult to
How very
express
sweet.
everything in words, but I once again thank Symposium. And as a resource person, I should also thank Gurmehr. She spoke very well on her topic, and I enjoyed your talk. Thank you so much. Thank
Thank you so much, ma'am. This is the sweetest thing. You made my day. I'm so happy
thank you.
now. My life is made. Thank you so much,
Good,
And
ma'am.
all of
good.
us at the Symposium Society completely agree with ma'am,
Thank you.
considering the fact that you're an ex-symposium member, the ex-head. We're really proud of everything that you've been doing.
Thank you.
So cute. Thank you.
So now, Dhritaman, I think,
Yeah, thank you so much, Monica ma'am. Those were really great words, and I would once again like to thank our speaker, Gurmehr ma'am.
Thank
I request our president Amitoj to kindly deliver the thank you.
um, so I mean, on behalf of the entire society, I would like to thank Gurmehr for joining us today. She is, of course, a busy person, and she managed to take out the time to join us. So it was really lovely talking to you. I personally have gotten to learn a lot from this one session, and instead of a lot of answers, I, was able to think of a lot of questions. So I think that is something to really take away from this. And I hope that all of the attendees that we've had, joining in, so all of your experience was as good as mine, personally. I hope that. Um, and I just like to quote a few lines from a book that I've just read. It's from Yuval Noah Harari. It's 21 Lessons for 21st Century. So it's about climate change, of course. So um, he writes that climate change may be far beyond the concerns of people in the midst of life and death emergency, but it might eventually make the Mumbai slums uninhabitable, and send enormous new waves of refugees across the Mediterranean and lead to a worldwide crisis in healthcare. So, I mean, this is why public engagement, outreach, and exactly discussions like these are really important. So that, I mean, all of us know, all of us have some amount of socio-cultural privilege. The fact that we're on Google Meet shows some amount of privilege that we have. So having discussions like these enables us to further this discourse, and I hope that all of us take something, something positive, something constructive from this session. And I would, of course, I mean, once I've graduated, I mean, I would ask the future presidents to call Gurmehr again for another session when she's way more successful and way more
Then we'll be calling
successful
you
in her
Amitoj.
career. Okay. So yeah, Dhritaman, would you like to add anything now?
Thank you once again, Gurmehr ma'am. That was a very detailed description of the entire agenda, followed by a very interactive question and answer session. Um, we thank for your for keeping out time for us, and all those who have joined us. Here is where we go ahead and conclude our lecture. Uh, Goodbye from our side. We will be back with another knowledge enriching session very soon. Till then, sayonara.